we are all responsible for our own happiness. I mean, you started on the topic of happiness. I think a lot of us point the finger at other people to take responsibility for our happiness or say that they're responsible for our misery. Actually, we are the only ones responsible for our happiness. So if this is something that you're after, take responsibility, start putting in some of these techniques into action. And I wish you all peace of mind and happiness. It's all in there inside you.
The Tom Screen podcast is owned and made possible by Ethical Marketing Service. If your business is struggling with Google or Facebook ads, maybe you're frustrated figuring it out or there's a performance issue, Ethical Marketing Service has worked on hundreds of accounts and we can help in this area. If you would like to find out if we can help, it's a free, no salesy consultation call and the link is in the description. Enjoy the episode. Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Georgina Halabi. Georgina, welcome.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Nice to be here.
It is nice to have you. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, I'd be delighted. So I'm a performance and wellbeing coach, and I help executives and professionals step into peak performance and wellbeing, not one at the expense of the other. And I think that's really important because we're seeing a lot of burnout, we're seeing a lot of anxiety, and people really think that they need to give everything to their work. They don't switch off, they can't switch off. There's a lot going on in their head. And so they get to a point where they want to jack it all in. And of course, this is a reflection of me and my own journey too. Go sit on a beach or do something that makes them feel good. And it's kind of an all or nothing scenario. And I believe that well-being is the foundation for peak performance, as opposed to being an either or scenario. So that's a bit about what I do, about who I am. I'm a mum of 2 teenage daughters. I live in the UK. I spent about 18 years in Asia. I came back from Singapore 2.5 years ago. And my own background too is in marketing and advertising. The last 5 years in the marketing technology space, and before that, sales and marketing in advertising agencies. So yeah, I'm all about the ethical marketing too.
Well, thank you for the introduction. There's a big follow-up that I want to make there, which is, if I'm not mistaken, you said you're sort of inspired by this due to your own story. Would you like to share a little bit about what made you, let's say, value the well-being over the performance, or maybe that they are both as important as the other?
Yeah. So I've always loved, I've always been very driven. So wanting to get into advertising from a very young age, very, very focused. And I actually moved into the digital marketing space, into small agencies where I've needed to do so many different tasks. So it's like being a big fish, instead of being a big fish in a small pond. Yeah, no, sorry, I always get that one wrong. I was a big fish in a small pond, having to put on lots of different hats. So, winning business, running the business, all of the marketing, managing teams, a lot of plates spinning. So there was a lot of flying the plane as I was building it. So there's always been that level of overwhelm if I let it. So part of me has always been very driven towards success and peak performance. And the other side of me, I'm a Gemini, quite happy to live on a beach, complete and utter hippie. So it's been very important for me to have both worlds collide. So the outer success and the inner peace. I don't think I would have got to where I did without that inner peace, without that ability to quieten my mind and to focus on what was really important. Yeah, so it's been really important in my own journey, definitely.
Well, I have seen it as a theme as well, that people who, let's say, focused on performance only found out that it was actually the case that when they focused on well-being as well, their performance actually improved rather than, it took something away from their performance. Would you say that's true?
I would say 100%, because if you're only focusing on performance, one, it's not sustainable, is it really? And let's be realistic, even if you hit all of your targets, they just go up and up and up. And where is the satisfaction? So there is also this recognition of, I'll be happy when I hit this level. right? And then the next level and the next level. And instead of enjoying how far you've come or appreciating the view, you're already looking up the rest of the mountain, and that's exhausting. So man can't live, all women can't live just on peak performance alone. I mean, why are we doing this? We're doing this so that we can be happy, so that we can have the holidays. We've got to kind of remember why we're working and anchor into that. Because, if you're going to run yourself into the ground just to be a performer, you've got to question, what am I doing it for? If you lose sight of who you are in the process, what good are you to anyone, least of all yourself? So it's really just remembering that there is only one time that you can be happy, and that's now. Even in the most stressful positions, you can be happy. And I like the idea of the fact that it's about leveraging different parts of your brain. So when are you performing at your best? You're performing at your best when you are calm, when you're focused, when you're present, when your mind's not going in 100 different directions. And when you're in that state of mind, your whole body chemistry changes, your physiology changes. You are in a state of well-being. And loads of results are coming out now that successful people aren't necessarily happy, despite the myth, I'll be happy when, but happy people do tend to be more successful. And you can see that in the way that they turn up in their relationships. You've got mirror neurons, people respond, and business is all about relationships. Marketing is really all about relationships, right? As well as how they show up for themselves, because they're less in their head, they're less judgmental, they're more present. And when you're present, you can respond to what situation is in front of you, which therefore impacts your performance, rather than being stuck in your own internal narratives of what could happen or how you have to be.
Thank you for that. There is a bunch of stuff I wanted to ask you about, but in your answer, you included the topic of happiness. So it's a very kind of top level question. How does one become happy?
Oh, well, I think there's a bit of a catch-22 in the name, because you can't become happy. You either are or you aren't. The becoming infers that it's a future state. All right, are you ready, Thomas? You ready? You're going to be happy now. Oh, no, sorry, that now just keeps on moving. So happiness only exists in the now. And when you're able to get into the now, you could start to notice all of the things that you've got to be grateful for, all of the things that you can enjoy. So let's imagine, I have this myth, I'll be happy when I ace my A levels, or my university degree, or I get that job, or I get that house and the car and the kids, and it's never ending, isn't it? Right? At what point can you sit down and go, right, now I'm happy? It's a moving target. And if we kind of realize that we are already at that point, that at some stage we said, okay, here I'm going to be happy, but we're not. You kind of have to understand that it's a mindset. It's less about the circumstance and the accumulation. It's about how you feel about it. It's about how you feel about yourself. So to me, happiness is the opposite of acquiring anything. You don't acquire anything to be happy. You let go of all of the stuff that is stopping you from being happy. Yeah, you let go of all of the rumination and the self-talk, and you just get quiet and present, and then bingo, you're happy. Happiness arises. Yeah.
So for people who, let's say, need an example of common things which people should let go of in order for that to happen, what might some examples be?
Well, the biggest one is your internal narrative, your negative narrative. Now, I don't know how aware you are, Thomas, of the inner judge, the constant critic, right? The narrative about everything. How we wind ourselves up, posturing, and our whole body, it's like how we've been wrong. Our whole mind is wired to threat, right? Especially when you look at what's going on all the time, and our mobile phone being with us, and there's catastrophe in the world and disasters and hatred, and then work, we're always firefighting. It's hard to get present and to be happy, right? So not only are we stuck thinking about everything out there, we're also stuck on a loop about ourselves. If other people told us half the things that we tell ourselves about ourselves, we would bop them in the nose, So our internal narrative just saps away our energy, saps away our happiness. And so when we're able to still that, And maybe I can show you how, I can give you some techniques, and you can feel for yourself the difference between having that busy, frantic mind that distracts you as opposed to being present. And it's interesting, maybe I can explain a little bit about how the mind works. So the mind tends to be in one of three places. So it's either in the future, thinking of all of the have-tos, should-dos, must-dos, what-ifs, right? Fiction, none of it has happened, right? But we spend a lot of our time there. This is where anxiety lives. Or it's stuck on the eternal replay of the past, which every time we replay it, incidentally, becomes a less faithful representation. That's fiction too. But we're stuck in the past or the future. Regret, anxiety. Now, our body only lives in one place. Our body only lives in the now, right? So stub your toe, you will know very quickly that your body only lives in the now. But things like meditation, yoga, going for a walk in nature, listening to a beautiful piece of music, right? When we get really embodied, finally our mind just goes into the now. And that's when we drop everything else. It happens naturally because you'll experience this quietness. And then that's the space where you notice, actually, I have all these amazing things. I'm here now. I'm happy. Here's what I have to be grateful for. So happiness isn't acquired. Happiness is about noticing what you have right in front of you. So if you want to, I can demonstrate some techniques to just switch off that narrative. And this is based on, mental fitness framework by the Positive Intelligence Group, which I find is excellent because I'm a lifelong meditator. I've gone through my own big journey, and this just kind of encapsulates it in a really easy to use technique. So if you want to, I'm happy to share that.
I definitely want to hear that.
Yeah. So how many of your viewers actually watch versus just listen? Because that will inform what I choose to demonstrate with.
The majority of viewers.
Of viewers. Okay. Maybe I'll do a bit of both, but let's start with watching. So can you be my guinea pig, please, Thomas?
I will try. I can't guarantee you I'll be a good guinea pig, but I will do my best.
You will be a fantastic guinea pig because you can't do this wrong. There's no way you can do this wrong. So if you can just watch my hand, and everybody out there, watch my hands too, okay? You can watch my left hand, right hand, both hand. It doesn't really matter. Are you ready?
I think so.
Let's go. Just watch. Stop. What was the quality of your mind just then?
I was focused on what you were doing and I didn't think about anything else.
Right. No narrative, right? No talk.
Nope.
Perfect. And how did that feel?
Well, I use the term focused. I wasn't thinking about anything else because you asked me to do something. I apparently want to do it well. And so I did it.
Yeah. So you've got the focus. I've got the quality of your attention. But how did that feel as, overall? Did you feel calm? Did you feel ground? What could you describe as how that felt?
I would say emotion-wise, that was absent. So I wasn't feeling anxious. I wasn't feeling happy. I wanted to do the task well on your behalf.
Oh, bless. Thank you. So generally, when most people do this, they feel calm, focused, grounded, very, very present because you're in the now and you're having this interaction with me. We've got this connection. And so that's a really great example of how long did that take us? 2 seconds, if that. You were able to just switch off all of that in an instance. No future. You weren't thinking about what you were going to say next or what you're going to have for your tea, or you weren't analyzing anything in the past. You were very, very grounded in the now. And that feels good because when you're in that position, you're empty of bias, you're empty of anything, you're ready and you're open, your mind is completely open. So what happens is when we switch off all of that narrative, we activate this part of our brain, it's called our prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of our brain that is responsible for resourcefulness, creativity, perspective. It's the ability to step out of ourselves and to watch our own program. And when we're in this part of our brain, you know how if you're doing a brain surgery, they can prod one part of your brain and your arm goes out, and the other one's part responsible for your language center. So when you're in this part of your brain, fear can't exist, right? When you're in that part of your brain, which is really the fear-based reactivity, love can't exist. So this is the space that we step into our happiness. It's chemical. It's chemical, and you can turn it on at will. So the trick that I want to show you, and for anybody else who wants to use this whenever, it's about activating 3 core muscles. One is the ability to switch off that narrative, right? All of your saboteurs. And the next one is the ability to switch that on. And then the third one is to do that at will. So the way we did that was using sight. But of course, you can use any of the other senses. You can do, what can I hear far away? What can I hear really close? You can do taste, touch. This one's a really good one. So if you take your thumb and your forefinger and you just rub them ever so gently, exquisite attention on the fingertip ridges that you can feel on both of your fingertip pads. And you may notice that your brain goes completely silent. And you only need to do this for a couple of seconds, like 10 seconds. And you've just switched on your sage mind. They call it your sage mind. You can also do it with your breath. I love the breath because it's physiologically wired to your whole mind body, right? It instantly impacts your nervous system. And so often when you're tense, people are high breathing. That's when people have panic attacks. It's all about getting that in breath as much as you can. Whereas when you relax, it's a deep out breath. So your mind is geared to your body through your breath. So that's another way that you can switch off that narrative. So this to me is a really quick and easy way to access the part of your brain that serves you and switch off the part that sabotages you. And when you're in that part of the brain, you kind of realize, because you get quite wise quite quickly, that happiness is now. Happiness can never exist in the future, because even in the future, it's always experienced in the now, right? That was a very long explanation and diatribe, Thomas.
Oh, I like it. And I like the fact that there was more than one, because my follow-up was going to be, how do we use that in everyday life? So if you were, let's say, had anxiety about a particular issue, how would you go about it? And I can picture myself like doing this in the middle of the street or something. So you gave me 3 to go with, which is good. You did mention about the fact that there are past, present, and people who are in the future in relation to the inner critic. The present was the stub toe. I tend to spend the majority of the time in the future, and in relation to the past, it tends to be solution orientated, meaning I did this, next time I'll do that differently. But all of the angst or inner critic comes from the future. What would you say to that, or what does that tell me about myself?
Well, first of all, I want to just say that it doesn't tell you about you. It tells you about your saboteurs and your inner judge, right? Because who you are, is this witness self, this wise self that's observing all of this, right? And it's important at this point to make a distinction here, because when you're looking at the future and you're going, what can I learn? What can I learn from this that I can apply? There's wisdom to that. So in the same way that, imagine you put your hand on a hot stove and you go, okay, there's intelligence. I've learned that I'm not going to do that again. That's we call that sage discernment. Whereas often what we do in the future, when we're on an anxiety loop, we're putting our hand on and on and on the hot stove, and that's not actually helping us, because it puts our brain and our body chemistry into a state of fight or flight, and we're not really good with that. So people, there's a list of 10 key saboteurs, right? One of them being the hypervigilant, who is constantly looking at the future and worrying about what's happening. So fine being vigilant. These people have a real gift for spotting things that could go wrong and mitigating them. That's great. But people with a high hypervigilant saboteur are so busy mind sweeping and imagining everything that could go wrong, that when it comes down to, and they're doing this for 100%, not 20% of the things that could viably go wrong, when it comes down to something actually being a real threat, they're not able to pay it the due attention because they're so exhausted after being in their head. So peak performance is really about letting go of that extra anxiety that our saboteurs create with the internal narrative that stops us being perfect, being able to perform. Whereas when we're in our sage brain, we can notice things objectively, we can take the lesson from it, and then we can decide from that space of perspective, creativity, resourcefulness, what would be the most productive response. But going back to what you said, what does it say about you? I would say, Thomas, go and take the positive intelligence saboteur test. It's free. It takes a couple of minutes and it's really, really enlightening. And it will tell me all about, or it will tell you all about your top saboteurs. And those are the different ways in which we get in our own way. So we may know a couple: hyperachiever, controller, restless, victim, avoider, pleaser, hyper rational, hyper vigilant. There's 10 of them. Go and have a look. But that doesn't tell you about who you are. It's your tendencies it's how you talk about to yourself, and it's all the negative ways you get in your own way. So generally, the idea is when you're in that loop, when you're feeling negative emotions, frustration, anger, guilt, that's your saboteurs talking. And you stop, you do a rep, right? Could be this. The visual one is, what can I see in the far distance? What can I see in the near distance, right? Or breaths, whatever it is, you bounce yourself out of that part of your mind. Oh, you're in a peaceful, resourceful state. And then what can I do next? But it sounds as if you're accessing that already by looking at the future and going, okay, what's the learning? What can I learn from taking my hand off that hot stove?
I definitely learned from the past. I'm not sure it's particularly helpful for me to go through that process in the future. I think there's a lot of wasted time of things that will never materialize, but I've run through that scenario anyway. In terms of if you were hijacked or were thinking about something or worrying about something in the future, do you use each and every one of your techniques that you shared, or what's your process there?
That's a great question. So some people have some that they prefer than others. So some people who are highly visual, they prefer the visual one. Some people are more auditory. Other people are more kinetic, right? So they'll use the tactile ones. I'm quite tactile and visual. So I won't do all of them. I'll pick one. I'm also very kinesthetic. So I focus on my breath a lot, or energy. But I'll pick one, whatever feels right, and I'll focus on that. Yeah. And in terms of a process, there is, go and read the book if it's of interest. It's a Positive Intelligence book by Shirzad Shameen. There's also a program, a 6-week boot camp for your brain, so that the idea is by the end of it, you don't get hijacked. You get to this level of equanimity where you can handle whatever life throws at you without the stress. So there are coaches all around the world, including myself, who send people on that Positive Intelligence mental fitness boot camp. And I've seen in 6.5 weeks, it has done more than so many other programs. I teach mindfulness, but this I don't even need to. It's like, here, snippets. Anyone can do it. You could be secular, you could be hyper rational, you can not be at all into woo-woo stuff, but it's still highly impactful. So if that's something that that does interest you, definitely go out and explore that. But at the very least, know that you can use these quick snackable tools. And the idea is the more that you're able to do this, it's like building those muscles, the less you're going to be hijacked. So you have opportunities like, I've got my cup of coffee now. Small things like this, you're going to be drinking it anyway. Smell your coffee, sip it, taste it. It'll take you, 10 seconds, just small moments of appreciation. Or when you're washing your hands after going to the bathroom, right? Feel that warm water on your hands. You slowly get embodied and start to train your mind to switch off and get embodied. That's the muscle you want to be flexing consistently and throughout the day. And you will notice you don't get hijacked. You notice that after a while, things that would normally trigger you, you're like, no, doesn't really bother me. And that's, a lot of people find that very cool, strange at first, and very cool. And then you get the ease and flow that starts to introduce, because you're present, you're aware, and you're able to pick up on things that most people wouldn't. You work smarter, not harder. Yeah.
One of the words I was going to use is habitual. So my habitual tendency is to be in the future. But as you say, if you start using some of those examples that you did, then that habit can change. I can totally see the value there. You mentioned the positive intelligence test. I think that would be really beneficial for people. For those who perhaps are not as well versed as you in relation to the topic, if someone was to say to you, that sounds interesting, what is positive intelligence? What would you say?
Yeah. So positive intelligence is a big global movement. And basically what they've done, research. So they've pulled together the last 20 years of science around neuroscience, cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, and peak performance, like sports science. And then they've added on like a load of research on top of that. And to understand, or I guess to create an operating system of our brain. So it's all around mental fitness, and mental fitness is our ability to handle whatever life throws at us with a positive mindset and without the stress. So what they did is they used the power of factor analysis. So that being, all of the colors out there boils down to 3 key colors: red, green, blue. In the same way, all the different ways that we sabotage ourselves come down to 10 key saboteurs. The principal one being the judge, and then our judge has a load of minion other saboteurs that it pulls in, right? So, for example, my judge might assume something to be dangerous, and it will pull in my avoider, right? I don't want to have that conflict. So they work hand in hand. And then they've kind of come out with this framework of 3 core muscles. The first one being the saboteur interceptor. The next one is your sage superpowers, and the sage perspective being any circumstance can be turned into a gift or an opportunity, right? It's about generating it. It's about how you look at it, because if you believe it's bad and terrible, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas if you believe it's a gift, you're more likely to look at ways in which it can be. So that's the second muscle. So you've got the saboteur interceptor, the first muscle, sage brain being your second muscle. That's your prefrontal cortex. And then the third muscle is allowing yourself to do these visual, auditory, tactile reps, or your breath, to switch from one to the other. So, I mean, it's a massive movement. They're across 50 countries, 800,000 clients, loads of coaches out there, and growing, because it's such an easy to use, easy to adopt framework. And interestingly, because I'm always interested in the science of how it works, you can see in an MRI scan at the end of people who do it properly, throw themselves into it. At the end of the 6.5 weeks, you can see atrophy in the gray matter at the back of your brain and growth in the gray matter at the front by your prefrontal cortex. And it just ticks so many boxes for me. A lot of what I teach and I show in terms of becoming aware of your inner narrative, not responding to your thoughts, not creating those negative emotional responses, but instead rewiring your brain through daily habits to respond differently, to take a step back, to notice, to come up with more constructive neural pathways. I think it's so strong in that. So I use it a lot with my own clients. I recommend they do that, because it accelerates our own coaching too. And I haven't met anyone who hasn't got saboteurs. We all have them. Yeah.
Well, it would be great if you can perhaps share some ways that it's impacted your life personally. Have you got anything that springs to mind for you there?
Well, where do I start? I have 2 teenage daughters, and one of them has high ADHD, high on the scale of oppositional defiance disorder. So the normal cues of poking the bear and knowing where to stop doesn't feature in her. And my original response was always, I mean, I could slow it down. I've spent years watching my brain process, and it would feel like barbarians running down the hill at me with axes, and I'm in a valley at the bottom, and I'm going, I want to run away, and then going, no, I can't, I have to step in and fight. And then my controller comes out and like, rah, I hulk. So a lot of my own personal development since having my daughter, because this was actually something I felt from a very young age, was how do I stop that instinctive response? And CBD could only get me that far because I was constantly triggered. My internal narrative was always taking it personally. On top of the fight or flight, it was, how dare she? Who does she think she is? And then beating myself up for I should know better. I should know better. I coach everyone else on this. right, so the first thing is getting myself out of that trapped response and being able to do these things in the moment, because I could have an hour's meditation, I could be completely zen, but in the moment I would still get triggered. So being able to do these small snackable techniques allowed me the space to step out of myself, so much so that I'm able to go, okay, what is it? Whatever you want, come at me, and I'm able to sit there and observe what it is that she actually needs, what it is that's winding her up. So as a mother, I'm able to address her need state a lot more. And it got to the point where my daughter went to my husband and went, what's happened to mum? What's happened to mum? Put her back like how she was, because I can't manipulate her. And I was like, my mind was blown. I was being manipulated by, at the time, my 11-year-old daughter. It blew my mind, but it took me to step out of myself and taking things personally to notice. And now I can go, okay, what is all this about? She's in a frantic state. She can't, her brain is in an absolute whir. I can just give her the space and not fuel that fire, just not fuel that fire. And that in itself, I mean, that to me is like black belt warrior stuff. And I don't always do it. I'm not always able to do it, but I'm still working on it. This is such a good technique to help me.
Yeah, it's a great example. And you probably saved yourself, I'm guessing, cumulatively months of arguments by what would you say, by learning that skill or practicing it. So great example. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. And the other thing that came out of that, Thomas, funnily enough, was this sense of compassion for her, which was looking at it from a completely different viewpoint. And then it was like, okay, what is it that she really needs right now? So not only was it saving myself months of arguments, it was being able to sort of help her. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably the more of the reason why you wanted to do it in the first place, right? Because parents typically care more about their children than they do themselves. So I can see how that would be really rewarding. You also mentioned about the fact that you have helped some of your clients. Do you have any favorite, should we say, case studies about people who have come to you and how it's changed their lives using this framework?
I have loads. You can see loads of them on my website and the testimonials. But let's think. One of my recent clients came to me with one-on-one coaching. Really, it was all about business and performance related. And I took him on he didn't even want to do the positive intelligence program because it was a group-based one, 3 or 4 people in the group. But the more we started to work together, the more he began to become aware of his internal narrative. He did the program. And one of the things that he was struggling with was the ability to be present. So he would be able to hyper-focus at work, to feel this sense of achievement. He'd go home and he wouldn't be able to be present with his son, with his wife. He'd feel really restless. Then he'd want to drink to get out of that, the machinations of his mind. And it was a lot of escapism. And then he'd beat himself up. Even on holiday, he couldn't relax. It was a case of, I have to get back to work. I have to get back to work. So he had a really strong combination of the judge, the hyperachiever, the restless, like constantly needing to be in action, and then the pleaser, this thought of, I'm failing my family, I'm failing myself, And so he really threw himself into this program. And within the first week, he started to notice draconian changes. By the end of the program, even by the middle of the program, he was noticing the quality and the caliber of time that he was spending with his family, had just improved markedly. So he wasn't feeling the need to run away. He wasn't feeling the need to sort of be working. When he was working productively. And when he was with his family, he was properly with his family. And so much opened up from that. Not only just with his mother, with his wife and son, but then also on top of that, looking objectively at his own relationship with his mum. And funnily enough, now he's stopped drinking, because he hasn't had the need to use it as a route for escape. That kind of desire to stop drinking has just grown organically in his mind. So he doesn't need it as a crux, and he's felt happier and better. And at times when he doesn't keep up the practice, he notices this judge narrative coming back in. He's got the tools to step back in. and sort of so these are tools for life. It's not like you get out that 6.5-week program and you're set. We will never get rid of our judges, but it's about knowing that it's just talk, it's just thoughts. You wouldn't go to your worst judge or your worst critic for advice, so why do we listen to our own self-talk? So it's knowing that he's not his worst thoughts, and that he's got the tools to carry on, as we all do, on this. We are the most important projects we will ever work on, right?
Yeah, I love that example. What occurred to me was the compounding of that example as well. So it's almost like you stopped it getting to the point where it could have been really bad, because if you extrapolate that timeline over a longer period, it's going to look, well, it may have looked significantly worse if you kept going down that road, whereas it hasn't done. So
yeah,
appreciate that. Is there anything that I should have asked you about today?
I think you've got it all. There is one thing that I'd like to just add to the example, because I find there's a growing trend of people who come to me for coaching. These are the people who are hyper rational, people who don't trust their emotions anymore. They've completely lost connection with their own body, within their own mind. They don't trust their emotions. And so when you talk about this compounding, it's almost as if these people are divorced from themselves, and there is very little self-compassion because they live at the mercy of their judge. And that's just, it's not living. It's painful, and nobody needs to go through that. So a lot of what the mental fitness program does is it starts to help people to build on self-compassion. So instead of the judge coming in, they build that reflex for understanding that not everybody has to be perfect, right? We're all on this learning journey of evolution. And the more we're able to sort of not be at the mercy of all of our negative self-talk and take a compassionate look at ourselves, then we're able to start to notice, there's a compounding effect on that. And, we have so much compassion and so much wisdom within all of us. And this is my mission, my personal mission, is to help people just switch off all of the crap and all of the noise. Because once you do that, that part of your brain or your mind or your soul, call it whatever you want to, it's so compassionate, it's so wise, that we create the space to listen to that. You have everything that you need in there, all of the wisdom, all of the compassion. And so this is just a really good tool to help you access that, but it's all already there. It's about sloughing off everything that gets in the way and finding the happiness underneath.
I think it's been a great topic, and you've given a lot of value today. So I appreciate that. For people who want to hire you or follow you, where do they go?
You can find me on georginahalabi.com. I'm sure you'll add the notes below. Or you can find me on LinkedIn too. I offer chats if anyone wants to come in and have a chat with me, or if you want to have a discovery call with me. It's 90 minutes and it's no obligation and no cost. And it's really to look at what's stopping you, what's blocking you from getting to where you want to go and what's behind that, and then looking at where you want to get to and what will enable you there. So I do give a lot of my time towards helping people. I would just say, if that's something you want to do, please honor it and my time by, approaching, if you want to have a proper sage to sage conversation, then definitely my door is open.
Well, I'm sure that's very valuable. So congrats for everything you do, and also for offering that as well, because I'm sure lots of people benefit from that. Would you like to just closing thoughts for the episode?
I think we are all responsible for our own happiness. I mean, you started on the topic of happiness. I think a lot of us point the finger at other people to take responsibility for our happiness, or say that they're responsible for our misery. Actually, we are the only ones responsible for our happiness. So if this is something that you're after, take responsibility, start putting in some of these techniques into action. And I wish you all peace of mind and happiness. It's all in there inside you.
Georgina, thank you for being a great guest today.
It's my pleasure.